Can I just ask why? Why is Kaisa's butt so big? Seriously, who designed this champion? Hold on guys, give me a sec. So this is a complete and total departure from the videos that I normally make on my channel. Since I normally talk about a lot more heavier subject matters, I decided that it might be fun to do a video series on one of my favorite games, and that would be League of Legends. More specifically, I'm going to be doing a video series on champions from League of Legends. The original series was actually supposed to be about all of my favorite champions being reworked. And since they all came out kind of back to back, I say kind of, I'll get more into it as the video series goes along. I've always wanted to do this video on Kaisa specifically because I knew about Kaisa months before she was ever released. And since I think it would be kind of strange to talk about a new champion after I talked about the reworks, when I want to talk about the rework champions kind of in a sequential order, I decided I'll make this video first and then get into what the main video series is supposed to be about, since I actually really do like Kaisa quite a bit, even though I think her game design is, how do you say, broken. So this first video is going to be about Kaisa. She's one of the newer champions in League of Legends that was released about 4 months ago to the time of which I am recording this video. In today's video, I'm going to be taking an in-depth look at her. I'm going to be talking about her physical design, her gameplay design, what works and what doesn't work about Kaisa, and why she's a fundamentally broken character, and why League of Legends probably should not make champions like her anymore. So first, I'm going to briefly talk about Kaisa as a character. And then, after I'm done explaining what I like and what I don't like, I will go into her gameplay, since that's probably the more important part of this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So Kaisa was a young 10-year-old Shuriman girl who was just minding her own business, playing with her friends, when all of a sudden a portal to the underworld known as the Void just sprung up and sucked her in. All of the inhabitants of her village were killed by the voidling creatures, but Kaisa, no, not Kaisa, because she was carrying a knife that her father gave her. I don't know why Kaisa was the only person that had a weapon, but okay, whatever. So Kaisa is attacked by a voidling creature and uses the knife that her father bequeathed her and kills the beast. She then decides to use the beast's carcass as a shield as she explores the rest of the void world that she now belongs to. Over time, Kaisa began to realize that her shield had begun to meld itself into her skin, and over the course of 10 years, the shield transformed into a second layer of skin that granted Kaisa superpowers. She can now dash at supersonic speeds, shoot plasma beams out of her hands, shoot missiles out of the eyeball things on her shoulder. I don't know what those are. Basically, Kaisa's Venom from Spider-Man. Kind of, but not really. Just kind of. What I like about Kaisa as a character is there's a tiny bit of subversion going on with her. Most characters that are oftentimes stranded and left alone in the wild that have to fend for themselves end up becoming angry and kind of jaded at the world and kind of cutthroat, no nonsense. But Kaisa, not really. Kaisa, strangely enough, retains a huge amount of her femininity. Kaisa ends up being actually a really kind-hearted and hopeful individual that's actually really optimistic, considering the fact that she spent 10 years fighting void creatures. It's actually really interesting. I really like it, the fact that instead of trying to make her all kind of mean and begrudging with the world, she actually seems more like she wants to save the world, not even from obligation, but just from the kindness of her heart. And I think that's actually really interesting. Instead of, again, going the cliche route of just being a gun-blazing jackass that's just kind of angry at the fact that she got stuck somewhere, she's like, no, I'm going to make the most of this and just go around helping people, because why would I not do that? That being said, there is one problem with Kaisa, and it's not really a problem, just more so it's something that confuses the actual hell out of me. And that is, why is Kaisa so beautiful? I know that might be a strange point of contention, but think about this for a second. For the last 10 years, she has been fighting monsters, and yet somehow at the end of it all, she ends up looking like a supermodel that should be taking pictures for the gram. I don't I don't get this. No, I'm not complaining. Not at all. In fact, that ass is mighty thick.
Nice.
But seriously, I don't know how Kaisa came to be as she is now. She genuinely looks like Scarlett Johansson if she dyed her hair purple. How did this happen? And I guess maybe you could add some headcanon that maybe her super suit, which grants her superpowers and gives her enhanced regeneration and boosts her body's physical capabilities up to peak human levels. I mean, obviously so, considering the fact that she's in a battle royale game where she's fighting for her life. I can kind of get that. But I do think that it's a bit of a missed opportunity to give Kaisa, I don't know, some scars or some type of battle damage rather than giving her a skin tight suit that makes her look basically naked. Actually, Kaisa would be naked, right? Because I don't really think that her second skin counts as clothing if it's skin. Does it? Does it count? I don't know. I do think that that's a little bit missed, and there's other people that also had complaints about it who have also expressed this great confusion at how she ended up so sexy. Some people a little bit more heavy-handed in their criticism of Kaisa's sexiness, but I'm not complaining. I mean, she's look at that ass, man. I'm not gonna complain about that. Another thing that I'm going to have to criticize Kaisa for is her voice actress. I do not know what directing they gave this woman, but a part of me thinks that she was doped up on Xanax before she recorded some of these lines, because she just sounds out of it. She also has a bit of a New Zealand, or maybe you could say slight Australian accent. Please don't hate me for that. But it really is confusing considering the fact that she's supposed to be Shuriman. I don't know how she got that kind of accent. Maybe she just kind of picked it up because she was just in the void and I guess they talk like that. I don't know who she was talking to pick this accent up, but it is a bit kind of out there considering, again, she's supposed to be Shuriman and Shuriman are like desert people. You know what I mean? Getting back to her voice actress specifically though, her voice actress delivers lines that are just kind of meh. That's the best way to describe it. Here, take a listen to some of them.
It smells like home here. Father, vile creature. Looking for me? Die, trespasser. It's a trap.
She genuinely sounds like she needs just a hit of espresso. She needs to drink just a little bit of coffee. She needs a little bit of a pick-me-up because she's just sounding really tired here, isn't she? Overall, I have to give Kaisa's design a 7 out of 10. I am a huge fan of characters that share a parasitic relationship with whatever thing gives them superpowers, because I think that can open up the door to some pretty interesting stories to be told. In fact, Kaisa's overall design looks like it's been heavily inspired from Kill la Kill, though that could quite possibly just be my imagination more so than anything concrete. However, even though it looks like she may have been inspired or even similar to, Kaisa's backstory does not really open up the door to all these interesting stories that could be told, and I feel like that is another missed opportunity. Kaisa's supersuit is just that. Supposedly it's a living organism. Supposedly it might think and do something, but it doesn't really have any impact on Kaisa overall, other than it may or may not be threatening her own life. I really don't know. There's no real detail there. And I think that kind of sucks, because I think that could be an interesting, dynamic between the two of them. Kind of like Venom. Kaisa in her suit could have been like Ryuko and Shinketsu from Kill la Kill, but really it's just kind of there, and yeah, I don't really like that, so I had to take points away from it. And yes, I know, Kaisa most definitely looks like a thought that should be posting on Instagram, but I mean, I didn't design the champion, so what am I supposed to do? Complain about it? And for those of y'all who are wondering if Kaisa is supposed to have a hella thick ass like this, I want you guys to know that, yes, she is supposed to. How do I know this? Because it's in the little comic book thing. Since lore mostly exists for fun in League of Legends, we're going to actually start talking about the most important aspect of Kaisa, her gameplay. So what I'm going to do first is talk about all of her abilities individually, and then I'm going to talk about how she works overall, and finally wrap us up with some final thoughts. On the Nexus League of Legends Champion Insight page, we get to learn a little bit more about the thought process behind how Kaisa came to be. And one of the most interesting things you'll find out about Kaisa is what she was designed to do and why it is we'll get to it. So there's a quote that I want to read from you guys out of this article that I want you guys to keep in the back of your heads as we continue to talk about Kaisa. And then there's this quote here. It says, "I never thought this would work," says Javon Riot Jag Sid Hugh. I think it's Sid Hugh. "It's a scary term. ADC assassin. I was just waiting for someone to tell me, please stop." Yes, someone should have told you to stop. Now, keeping that quote in the back of our heads, let's go ahead and start talking about all of Kaisa's abilities individually first, and then talk about her overall. So let's first start off by talking about Kaisa's passive, Second Skin, which actually has about 3 passives, technically. Alright, let's get into it. So the first part of Second Skin is called Caustic Wounds. So whenever Kaisa basic attacks, or whenever Kaisa hits you with the Void Seeker, which is her W, we'll get into that in just a second, or whenever her support, or anyone on her team for that matter, immobilizes an enemy champion, they are affected with Plasma. Now, Plasma does 2 things. 1, it gives Kaisa extra on-hit damage. 2, whenever someone gets hit with Plasma 4 times, they can get hit a 5th time, and that plasma is ruptured. Whenever plasma is ruptured, there's bonus damage granted to Kaisa, which is equal to, well, all this math, that's based on the target's missing health. Now, another cool thing about Caustic Wounds is that you don't actually have to hit your opponent 5 times. 1, because of the immobilizing effect, and 2, because of Void Seeker. Void Seeker adds 2 stacks of plasma because there's 2 blasts of missiles that get hit. We'll talk about it in a second, don't worry, okay? So the cool thing about it is it sounds a bit taxing. It does sound silly to try to hit your enemy 5 times in order to rupture the plasma for bonus damage, but you have to keep a couple of things in mind. 1, this is free. Vayne has a very similar ability in her Silver Bolts, but that takes up an entire ability. So Vayne really technically only has like 3 abilities that she uses. So the cool thing about Caustic Wounds is, like I said, you get this for free. This is just her passive. You just do extra damage. Another cool thing about Caustic Wounds is how it works. Now, again, I have to compare it to Vayne because everyone compares Kaisa to Vayne. And the thing about Silver Bolts is that it deals damage based on the target's maximum health. So obviously, a lot of people would realize that that's really good for tank shredding. Kaisa, on the other hand, deals damage based on missing health, which helps her out with that whole assassination thing. Because you have to hit your enemy so many times, by the time you rupture the plasma, it's going to be doing a lot more damage because of the nature of the ability. It does damage based on the enemy's missing health. Now, we're going to talk about Caustic Wounds again in just a second when we start talking about Void Seeker, but it's very important to realize that, again, while it sounds inefficient to try to stack this up by just hitting your opponent 5 times, you have to realize you get this for free. You also have to realize that Caustic Wound again adds bonus on hit damage that scales with AP, which we'll talk about in a second. That's going to become very important later. So let's talk about Kaisa's second passive, and that's Living Weapon. Living Weapon is really simple. Basically, all of Kaisa's abilities can be upgraded except her ultimate. The only way to upgrade each of her abilities is to hit a maximum of 100, either 100 attack speed, 100 ability power, or 100 attack damage in order to upgrade each ability. I'll go through it individually as the video goes on so you don't have to worry too much about it, but that's basically it. You hit 100 bonus any stat and you get to upgrade one of her abilities. Kaisa's Q is called Ecanthian Rain. Basically, Kaisa shoots 6 missiles at people. That's it. It scales with AD and AP. It's literally that simple. There's nothing more to it than that. When you gain 100 bonus AD, of course, Ecanthian Rain increases, and then you get to fire 10 missiles at people, but that's it. Now, while of course I'm downplaying the ability as being incredibly simple, there are some important things that we need to discuss about this. 1, this ability does not require any targeting on the player's part. So basically, you press Q and she just shoots missiles. Now, you might think that that's a little too easy. You might think that that's just a little too simple, right? But yeah, kind of and not really, because while you add on to the fact that there's no targeting with this ability, that you can't miss it, you sacrifice that you don't get to really choose your target. So basically, Kaisa's missiles hit anybody that's close to Kaisa. It does not focus champions, which means that if Kaisa uses her Q in a swarm of minions or in a swarm of enemy champions, it just kind of goes all over the place. There are many a times where I have tried to execute people with the Ecanthian Rain, and because there is a minion right next to me, all of my missiles went to them and my enemy just got to walk away. That being said, if anyone is stupid enough, if anyone is dumb enough to try to engage Kaisa by themselves, all isolated like, and they get pelted with this ability head on, it deals quite a bit of damage to them, especially in the early game. It deals a lot of damage later in the game, especially after you upgrade it. So the trade-off is you can't choose your targets, but if you time it correctly when an enemy is isolated, which goes on to the whole theme of her being an assassin, which we will get into, it does deal a nice bit of damage. It is a nice Q ability. There's no real complaints here apart from you don't really get to choose who you would target. Next, we talk about Void Seeker. Kaisa fires 2 really big missiles. That's it. It's literally that simple. If you gain 100 ability power, you get to upgrade it. Now this is where it gets really cool, because if you upgrade Void Seeker, now instead of only adding 2 plasma stacks, Void Seeker adds 3. And here's another cool thing. Its cooldown is then refunded. So a really interesting thing about Void Seeker is, especially in the early game, this thing does a good bit of damage. Actually, this ability does a good bit of damage at any point in the game. And what's also really cool about it is that its range is actually pretty good. Now, it's not an Ash arrow, it's not global, but it has a really, really good range. Now, the drawback with Void Seeker, however, in the early game, is that it has a really high cooldown. So while you can use it for some really good pokes, it's very important to understand that if you can't really spam it. Again, you have a 22-second cooldown on it at level 1. And it isn't really at its strongest in the early game. It's really, really powerful if you choose to upgrade it, which I'll explain how you can actually upgrade all of Kaisa's abilities in the same game. But it is really helpful. I'm not gonna lie. It's probably one of her, if not the best ability Kaisa has. It's a nuke. It's really strong. If you want to go AP with it, it gets even stronger, but it actually scales better with AD. It's very important to understand that if you choose to upgrade this ability, you won't be disappointed. It is actually really good because it is really strong. Another important thing to add to Void Seeker is that whenever it hits an enemy, it reveals them for a couple of seconds. So if there's someone hiding in the bush, you can use Void Seeker to try to check it out so you don't face plant. So that's neat. That's cool. It is honestly one of the best sniping abilities in the game. At first, when I saw it in the trailer, I really thought it was going to be kind of difficult to hit people with it, but it really isn't. It actually has a pretty big hitbox, and it's 2 giant missiles, so it is kind of hard to miss. It has a pretty good gracious hitbox for you. You know, for better or for worse, if you're fighting Kaisa, then you probably won't really like it all that much. Kaisa's third ability is Supercharge! Basically, Kaisa takes a second to stop attacking. Literally about 1.2 seconds to stop attacking, but the trade-off is Kaisa gets to move faster now. Another interesting thing about this ability is that Kaisa then gains bonus attack speed for 4 seconds. What's also cool about this ability is that Kaisa's basic attacks reduce the cooldown on Supercharge by half a second. And if you couldn't tell, Supercharge is upgraded by gaining 100% bonus attack speed. Oh, and here's a neato thing about this is just neato right here. Supercharge, when it's upgraded, makes Kaisa invisible. Allow me to just say that this is truly one of my favorite abilities on this champion. One of my favorite abilities on a champion in the game in general. Now, most people actually really do not like Supercharge because it prevents you from attacking for a couple of seconds. At its maximum, it prevents you from attacking for half a second, and only keeps you invisible for, well, half a second. But it is interesting to note that this ability is designed to be tactical, and that's what I really like about it. Not only can I use Supercharge to help me like dodge and bob and weave out of different attacks and abilities, but another thing that's interesting about Supercharge is kind of how it works functionally. Now, I have to compare her to Vayne because that's what everyone does, and whenever Vayne uses her final hour, whenever she volts, she gets to turn invisible for 1 second. I personally am not the best Vayne player, I will admit this to everyone, and I prematurely end up attacking and never really get to, get the most out of my invisibility as Vayne, as other people can when they reposition because they're better than I am. But the cool thing about Kaisa is you don't have to worry about prematurely attacking because you can't attack. Some people don't like the Supercharge because they use it in the heat of a battle, and you're not supposed to use Supercharge in the heat of a fight. You're supposed to use Supercharge either to kite back or to get ready to engage, but you never use Supercharge in the middle of a fight because you just stop attacking. You will end up missing a lot of damage if you try to Supercharge in the middle of a fight. It's just, have you watched Dragon Ball Z? Actually, in Dragon Ball Z, they Supercharge in the middle of fights all the time. Don't be like Dragon Ball Z, guys. This ability, at least in my personal opinion, is a little bit more smoother than Vayne's Vault. Vayne's Vault is a bit more mechanical, and that's not really bad, but it feels more like a break from the action, rather as Kaisa feels a little bit more smoother. And again, because the game forces you to not attack, you have to run out the speed bonus. It's no other option. You just have to do it. And I really do like that because then it gives you more time, or at least half a second, to think critically about how you're going to kite back and how you're going to continue to fight. All in all, like all of Kaisa's abilities, it is incredibly simple. However, in its simplicity, there is a lot of complexity that comes from it, and I really like it. It is probably one of the best kiting abilities in this entire game, apart from Vayne's Vault. And finally, we talk about Kaisa's ultimate, Killer Instinct. Kaisa dashes to a target that has been affected by plasma, and she gains a shield that scales with both AD and AP. That's it. Yeah, Kaisa's not the most complex champion, guys. I'm sorry. She's just not. Now, while Killer Instinct has a really huge condition, and it's not really a free-flowing dash, say like, Riven, I really like this. I really do like Killer Instinct, not only because it fixes probably one of the biggest issues most AD carries have, and that is getting into a good position in order to continue to fight, but also because it grants you a extra thick shield, and because Kaisa is all about getting up in people's face and blasting them like they're Gohan fighting Frieza in Dragon Ball Z. This ability, it's nice. That's nice. Another interesting thing about this ability that I have used it to do all the time is just dodge my opponents whenever they try to get in my face. It's saved me a lot of times, I have to say. It's very simple. There's not really much to it other than the fact that there's actually a lot you can do with it. You can dodge in multiple enemy skill shots if you have the ability up. Some people might find this to be a waste, but considering the fact that you have Super Charge, where you can just, kite back and move out of the way and turn invisible, this ability actually opens the door to do a lot of ways to fight and can save you from a lot of different situations as well. There's been plenty of times where my enemy has got the jump on me and I've thrown up this extra thick shield only to turn the tables on them, heal myself back up, and then we'll kill them and walk away. All in all, I like the ability. It's simple. It is conditional, which I don't really like entirely, but at the same time, it works well. So those are all of Kaisa's abilities. So let's actually talk about Kaisa in general. Kaisa, when she was first released, is a completely different beast than how Kaisa is now, or how Kaisa was, before the event. And we'll talk about the event in just a second. When Kaisa was first released, Kaisa was just straight booty. Seriously, the only thing that was noteworthy about Kaisa when she was first released was her booty. And I would be lying if I didn't say that. Probably half the reason why I played Kaisa was just because of her. Whenever a new champion or a rework is posted in League of Legends, people usually front at their mouth to either play them or to ban them. With Kaisa, no one even cared. I think everyone just kind of looked at her like she was just reworked Vayne and were like, whatever, I don't care. But even though a lot of people compare her to Vayne, Kaisa is truly and genuinely her own champion altogether. And I'm going to explain why Kaisa is a broken mess right now, actually. It's actually really ironic because when I originally set out to make this video, I was actually going to put forth a case on how Kaisa was not broken, but then she got buffed. And so I had to change everything. So here's something that's very important we're going to have to understand when we start talking about Kaisa. Kaisa was designed to be an AD carry assassin. And if you understand how an AD carry works and how an assassin works, then you would understand that they are fundamentally two completely different type of damage dealers. An AD carry's entire function in a team is to deal the most amount of damage from a safe position as consistently as possible. An assassin is the complete opposite. They are trying to do the most amount of damage in the shortest amount of time and then escape after they have engaged. Kaisa, on the other hand, does both. Now, there is a huge weakness in this, and that was originally Kaisa's range. Kaisa's original attack range for her basic attacks was 500, which means Kaisa had to get really close in order to trade with her opponents. This opened up one of the biggest weaknesses Kaisa had, because Kaisa could not trade effectively with her opponents when she was first released, and Kaisa could not kite out her opponents very well when she was first released either because her attack range was so short, meaning that she was always in danger of being counterattacked. So she couldn't really fit her role as an AD carry very well because she had to be in your opponent's face. If you built a bunch of damage with Kaisa, she had nothing defensively. Because Kaisa doesn't have the escape mechanism that most assassins have, Kaisa was a sitting duck. And this is why Kaisa did very poorly when she first came out. Her basic attack range really gimped her ability to actually do any of her jobs well, because she was always in range to get counterattacked. Now this requires a little bit more of explaining because Kaisa was not the first champion released with an attack range of 500. In fact, both Lucian and Silver both now still have an attack range of 500. What's the difference between Lucian, Silver, and Kaisa? Well, I'll explain. Lucian and Silver are designed the same exact way, and not so far as how their abilities work, because it's totally different, but in like the basic principle of what their abilities are supposed to do, and that is, because of their attack range being so short, whenever an enemy steps into their range, Silver and Lucian are designed to completely overwhelm their opponent with their damage, rather than being able to do consistent damage at a safe area. Silver has a boomerang blade. Silver just throws out her blade, which deals damage first. He comes back, deals damage a second time. Also, Silver can hit really hard. Silver also has an attack speed buff that when she presses W, that ricochets and deals extra damage. Silver also has a spell shield, so if you step into Silver's range and try to attack her, she can block your first initial attack, if it's a spell or whatever, and continue to bombard you with a bunch of abilities. Lucian works very similarly in that Lucian's attack range is short. However, whenever Lucian uses an ability, he gains a bonus attack. So he gets to shoot you twice, basically. Now, again, Lucian can pretty much outtrade, I think, any champion in the early game with just their auto attacks because of how it works. Lucian is very, very powerful, and it's really hard to overwhelm Lucian or even fight Lucian one-on-one, especially if he's really good mechanically. And this is how these champions are designed. Kaisa is designed in the same way, and that's why her attack range was so short. The problem, however, was that Kaisa could not effectively overwhelm her opponent if they stepped into her range. Why is that? Well, you remember what I said about her Q, right? And how it attacks any enemy that's close to Kaisa, not the enemy that Kaisa is attacking currently? Yeah, that's why. Kaisa's Q was very unreliable in the early game. Kaisa's Q can be unreliable in the late game. It's actually really good on isolated targets, sure, but as far as actually getting people in the thick of the battle, it will go all over the place. That's something that Lucian and Silver don't have an issue with, because Silver's boomerang blade attacks everyone in a line, and Lucian can hit multiple targets with all of his abilities. Now, that's only the first reason as to why Kaisa didn't really do too well, and it's actually kind of the most important reason, because the second thing that's also very important to note about how assassins are designed is how they usually always have an escape mechanism. Think of Zed, think of Talon, even think of Evelyn, and we'll talk about Evelyn, don't worry about all of that. It's that we'll talk about assassins a lot more in depth in the next video, but the thing that's important in today's video is how Kaisa did not have a very reliable escape mechanism. Supercharge is pretty good early because you get a speed buff longer. However, because it only lasts for half a second later in the game, Kaisa can't really use this invisibility as a way to escape her enemies. More so, she can only use it as a way to kite her enemies and then continue to fight. It's not really the best mechanism to use to run away from people later in the game because of how short the bonus movement speed lasts. So when we combine these two problems together, we get a champion that can neither deal consistent damage from a safe location, because Kaisa has to get up close to you in order to deal her damage, and you get a champion that can't burst people down quickly and escape because Kaisa has no escape mechanism. Kaisa, as an ADC assassin, functionally cannot work with a short attack range. But the opposite is totally true as well. Kaisa's attack range buff was only increased by 25 units. But that's all that needed to happen, because 25 units was enough to get her in a safe position to where she can effectively kite her enemies out, constantly apply damage to them, and even burst them down as an assassin. Yes, my friends, that's right. Just adding that 25 range put Kaisa in a broken state, because now Kaisa can do both jobs of an AD carry and an assassin incredibly well with almost none of the weaknesses. You see, my friends, the quote-unquote reward of playing an assassin is that if you use all of their abilities correctly, then you can pretty much one-shot any opponent that you fight. However, if you don't use your combo correctly, or if your combo is interrupted, you basically can't do anything for a couple of seconds. This is how you counter an assassin functionally. This is the balance of an assassin. If they can't rotate their damage quickly enough, then they're left defenseless. Now, any assassin that just builds a bunch of cooldown is a little different, and this is kind of later in the game, but this is basically how you fight them early on. And this, my friends, lies in how Kaisa is broken. Kaisa does not have this weakness, because Kaisa can not only simultaneously dash in and deal a bunch of damage quickly on isolated targets, but Kaisa can do consistent damage too because she's also a marksman. Kaisa has all of the strengths of an AD carry that can kite back, and also has the strength of being able to quickly engage on you like an assassin and burst you down without you even being able to fight back efficiently. Now, some people might bring up the fact that Vayne and Twitch are both AD carries, but they play like assassins. And if you are one of those people who think that, if you think that Vayne and Twitch are indeed AD carry assassins, well, I'd have to say that you are wrong. You are just completely wrong. Once again, the way an AD carry does damage is to do the most amount of damage consistently from a safe location. Twitch might turn invisible, and it might feel like an assassination because he comes out of nowhere and flanks you, but as far as the classification of an assassin goes and the way League of Legends works, he doesn't actually act like an assassin, and the same thing goes for Vayne as well. In fact, Twitch, if anything, fully encapsulates what it means to be an AD carry. He does the most amount of damage from an incredibly safe position when he uses ultimate, and oftentimes it's really hard to get up to Twitch and engage on him. But the problem with Twitch is the fact that if you just stun him or just lock him down, he gets blown up because he's really squishy. Now, Vayne again might feel like an assassin because she can come out of nowhere and burst you down, especially if she has all the items she needs. But again, Vayne is tried and truly an AD carry. Vayne is probably one of the best counters in the game, second only to her hardest counter, and that would be, yeah, that's right, Ashe. In fact, Ashe hard counters both Twitch and Vayne at all stages of the game. And the reason why is because, once again, assassins deal damage as quickly as possible in a couple of seconds, if not just 1 to 2 seconds. Vayne still has to hit an enemy 3 times in order to get the most out of her silver bolts. Ashe, on the other hand, can literally just stop Vayne from doing anything with her arrow and just pelt her with a bunch of arrows herself with her Q, and just completely destroys Vayne entirely. Because Vayne needs the setup of hitting her enemy 3 times, and Ashe just really needs to hit you a couple of times to get her frost arrows out, there's really not much you can do in these types of situations. And this is why Ashe will always hard stomp both Vayne and Twitch. I mean, seriously, if you ever have any trouble with Twitch or Vayne, just play Ashe and you'll destroy them. Take a look at this clip here, which highlights one of the biggest weaknesses of Vayne. Again, Vayne gets the drop on me, but I'm able to walk away from her because she has to deal consistent damage. She doesn't burst me down. And if at any point she stops auto-attacking, well, there's nothing she can do. Now again, this sounds incredibly obvious, but you have to realize that, well, that's the weakness of an AD carry, and this is what keeps Vayne from being an assassin. So Vayne might feel like an assassin because she can come out of nowhere and just, 3-shot you, but if you can just paralyze her, stop her, or just get out of range, there's really not much you can do. Kaisa, on the other hand, still has one of the biggest strengths that make an assassin, an incredibly strong engage with her ultimate. If Kaisa hits you one time, if Kaisa blasts you from afar with her W, she can engage on you, and that completely removes the problem of trying to get into a safe position to fight you, and completely removes the problem of getting into range to attack you as well, because, again, her ultimate dashes you to your target, so there's really not much way they can escape unless they just flash. Now, the point in explaining the differences between an assassin and AD carry, again, using Twitch and Vayne, is because a lot of people would consider them to be assassins based on how they play. They both can turn invisible, although Vayne can only turn invisible with her ultimate, and it feels like they're assassins because they do a lot of damage really quickly. But again, if you play characters like Ashe, you can just stop them and out-damage them, and it's really easy. On the other hand, with Kaisa, she doesn't have that weakness. In fact, if you put Kaisa up against Ashe, Kaisa would not have the problem that Twitch and Vayne have, because Kaisa can burst Ashe down before Ashe can really do much of anything. She can even just straight up dodge her frost arrow if she's quick enough. This, my friends, is why I say Kaisa is fundamentally broken. And based on how she's designed, there's really no way you can make Kaisa a fair opponent to fight against. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't any bad matchups for Kaisa. This doesn't mean that there aren't really any counter picks for Kaisa. But honestly, your only real hope for fighting against the Kaisa is making sure she doesn't get into the late game. Because if she does, she basically becomes unstoppable. You basically just have to curb stomp her to the ground. Otherwise, if you go even with Kaisa, she's going to be able to destroy you. Because here's another important thing you have to realize. Kaisa is a hybrid scaling character, which means it's really hard to build effectively against the Kaisa because she can do whatever she wants. If Kaisa wants to play AP, she can do that. If Kaisa wants to play hybrid, she can do that. If she just wants to go full crit AD, she can do that. And how are you supposed to fight against an enemy champion that can do anything and go against any defense that you build up? The answer is you really can't. That being said, I do still have to add some more important details to talk about when it comes to Kaisa. And that is how when Kaisa first came out, one very important reason as to why she didn't do very well was because a lot of people didn't understand that Kaisa does not gain any power spikes from items. See, typically most AD carries or most characters in the game in general get really powerful when they get, say, a core item. An item that pretty much either fundamentally covers up a weakness the character has, or an item that just kind of really synergizes with the champion's kit. Say, Zed in Yumu's Ghostblade or something like that. So basically, you get what is called a power spike, where there's a fundamental change in power in the champion that you can track based on an item. It's clear as day to see just how strong they are with the item now. Kaisa doesn't really have that. Now, some people might say that Rageblade counts, but not really, because Rageblade was redesigned specifically to work well on any champion in general, so Rageblade is good on pretty much any champion, like melee or otherwise, that gets it, apart from like mages. So Rageblade can be considered a core item for Kaisa, but it's not the same as granting her like a power spike. Kaisa power spikes with her abilities. This is the bread and butter of Kaisa's kit. Kaisa is designed to be played with all of her abilities upgraded. Shoka. Yes, I know, shocking. But seriously, this is why Kaisa did not have a lot of success when she first came out. Because a lot of people didn't realize that Kaisa does not spike with a bunch of crit. In fact, Kaisa actually works well more with an on-hit build than she does with a critical hit build. I actually ended up discovering this on complete accident. I remember one day I was playing and I decided to start with Doran's Blade. And I was getting smacked in lane, so I bought a second Doran's Blade. The long and short of it is I ended up buying Bloodthirster first item because it grants 80 AD. And then I got to upgrade her Q first. And then I realized just the night and day difference to having an early game Q upgrade rather than having just any regular item. And a lot of people didn't realize this, but Kaisa is not like Vayne. Vayne gets a really huge power bonus when she gets Static Shiv, and even stronger when she gets Infinity Edge, obviously, because every AD carry works that way. But what was important about Kaisa is that, again, it wasn't critical hit. It was evolving her abilities. That is what makes the difference between Kaisa. It's not any one item. Because a lot of people didn't realize this at first, she actually kind of suffered a lot in most of her games, which is why Kaisa just kind of looked like garbage. And so now that leads me to the last thing we need to talk about in this video.
Hey, I just want to say goodbye. Goodbye to the people who hated on me. Goodbye to the people who loved me. Goodbye to the people who trusted me. Goodbye to everyone.
Yes, when the crit items were reworked, when Infinity Edge was pushed back into a late game item, the AD carries were in a frenzy. No one knew how to build them. No one knew what to do. You got this garbage ass Storm Razor that kinda on paper sounded really cool, but actually didn't really synergize very well with many AD carries. And then you just had the added insult of having all of your Zeal items price increased, again pushing back your late game or early game power. However, it was in these dark days, it was in this bleak outlook of the game, where Kaisa finally found her place. Because you see, my friends, again, Kaisa actually was one of the few AD carries that was largely unaffected by this and didn't kind of really need to readjust her playstyle at all, because Kaisa is most powerful when using on-hit build. Now, the entire point of the whole crit rework, which I may or may not talk about someday, was in order to try to increase players getting on-hit builds, I think, or trying to get players to diversify the builds that they play on AD carries. I don't really think the people at Riot play their own fucking game when they thought that it was a good idea to fundamentally change how critical striking works, but again, I'll talk about that maybe in some other video. But Kaisa was able to finally find her stride here, because again, Kaisa is a hybrid, and Kaisa never actually did well with critical items in general. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that building crit is bad on any champion really, but on Kaisa, it's best to focus on hit and evolving your abilities rather than just trying to get a bunch of critical hits, because again, Kaisa doesn't power spike the way other AD carries do. If you try to match other AD carries by just building the same items they build on Kaisa without upgrading your abilities, you're going to get clapped, because that's not how Kaisa was designed to be played. There was a period of time where Kaisa was either pick or ban, because she was functionally probably one of the best AD carries to play in the game until everyone readjusted to the Dark Ages and finally figured out a way to play these new different AD carries, these all new, all different AD carries. So anyway, all in all, this is my video on Kaisa. I'm going to wrap it up here. Kaisa is one of my favorite champions in League of Legends, not just solely in her physical design, but just in her playability. However, I cannot allow my bias to cloud my judgments in objectively analyzing a champion. Kaisa fundamentally is broken, and your only hope in defeating Kaisa is smacking her ass down in the early game. Kaisa is way too strong and way too good at what she does. Kaisa may not have the escape ability that most assassins have, but Kaisa doesn't need it due to how she functions. Kaisa is just way too powerful. So I don't really know how you can fix Kaisa without making her, straight garbage again. But I just have to say that we don't need more champions like Kaisa in the game. It's not a good idea to design AD carry assassins because they are just way too strong. They just do their job way too well, because you can either kite people back to a point where they can't even hit you and attack you, or you can just assassinate people before they even have a chance to react. And I found this out by playing one game. I was actually playing Kaisa jungle, and I realized Kaisa's broken state here. In the same exact game, I was able to clap Lucian without him even being able to fight me back efficiently. And then later in that same exact game, again as jungle Kaisa, I was able to 1v1 Urgot and kite him out and just destroy him. At one point I could just stand still and just beat his face in. And that's how I knew Kaisa is just way too strong. So all in all, final verdict, I have to give Kaisa's gameplay an 8 out of 10. I have to deduct 2 points because she's broken. So, yeah. But again, Kaisa's my favorite champion, so that's why the rating's really high. So, this is my first in-depth look at a champion for League of Legends, and the video ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be. But there's a lot to discuss. I mean, these videos are supposed to be in-depth. We're not doing the whole farming guide, you know what I mean? We're not doing that whole... Well, these items are really good. We're talking about the champion fundamentally. And I guess I could have done that with Kaisa and really explain which items work best and which doesn't. But because of Kaisa's hybrid nature, it's so diverse. You can do whatever you want with Kaisa and you could pretty much succeed. There's really no point in doing that with Kaisa, honestly. However, in the future, I will be doing that with these rework champions, because that's what the main bulk of this series is going to be. I'm going to be comparing and contrasting all of the rework champions that I used to play, and probably will continue to play, actually, because they were my favorite champions. So the next video is actually going to be on Evelyn, and that is technically supposed to be the first video of this series. So stay tuned for that. And in fact, each reworked video is probably going to come out in the order of which these champions were reworked. So that way you'll be able to tell which champions we're going to do after Evelyn. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Hopefully you will stay with me as I continue to analyze these champions. So with that being said, man, I certainly hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And if you did, man, go ahead and click the like button. And shoot, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. As always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I will see you cool cats soon. Adios. Hey, wait a minute. If Kaisa spent 10 years in the void, that would make her a virgin. Unless she got tentacle.